Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to continue our lecture series on industrialization, and today we're going to focus on American imperialism. Our industry is growing; it's growing really rapidly, and we are now producing more goods than just Americans can buy. And so, what we need is larger markets. A market is just people to sell goods to. The American economy is going gangbusters, and one of the results of that is we need to be able to trade and we need to be able to sell things to people, and there's different ways to do that. One of the ways to do that is just trade like we are with Great Britain, which there we don't manipulate that trade at all. Another way to do it is have a captive market, and that is done through imperialism, where you go into less developed countries and establish a sphere of influence there that essentially you can kind of set up monopolies of trade. The other thing that's happening because of industrialization is Americans are starting to become concerned that we don't have enough resources to fuel our economy. Now, that's not true. We've got, some of the best resources in the world located right here in the United States. It's one of the reasons why our economy is so much superior to other nations. But as these businesses are growing, more and more investors are looking for other ways they're building up wealth. They're looking for ways to use that wealth to invest in other businesses to increase the wealth even more. And so they're starting to look overseas. We have now expanded across the continental United States. And so American imperialism is really, once we get to the ocean, we still have that idea of manifest destiny. That we're supposed to expand. We're supposed to expand, and so what will happen is we'll start to expand overseas. Now, American imperialism, sometimes we are going to set up colonies in some places, and the Philippines are going to be one of them. Have the Spanish-American War, Cuba's another, Puerto Rico, and so some of the things that we do they're not going to be great, right? Some of the way we treat the Philippines is it's not going to be great. American imperialism is not the same as European imperialism. European imperialism has been beyond the pale awful. American imperialism, it's going to be kind of minor. And I don't know necessarily, I don't want to suggest that that's because we're so much more enlightened, although because it happens later, we've already, outlawed slavery. And so those kind of things, because that's happened, that's going to be important, because we're not going to do what Europe did, which is like enslave 25% of the planet. It's not going to be that bad. We are going to use our superior economy to cut trade deals that aren't going to be great. We'll talk about what happens in the Philippines with Aguinaldo, and it's not great stuff. But for the most part, we're going to buy Alaska. What happens in Hawaii is weird. We'll talk about that today. But we are going to be expanding, and we are going to be expanding into new markets. Some of it is going to be relatively benign, and some of it's going to be not so great. But I feel like a lot of times in history we confuse, because the word imperialism is being used, that we mistake American imperialism for European imperialism. And although imperialism we learned during World War I, and we'll talk about that in the next set of lectures, imperialism is not good. And we'll talk about why. American imperialism, but it's on a scale, right? And so European imperialism, right? American imperialism, yeah, if you can interpret my oohs and ahs. Right. So what is imperialism? Well, it's when a stronger nation attempts to create essentially empires, whether it's political empires or, in America's case, kind of economic empire, by dominating weaker nations economically, politically, or militarily. It's also can be called expansionism. And so America is really kind of going to do this all kinds of different ways. We'll do it economically, most of the time, but sometimes it will be done militarily as well, like the Spanish-American War. So, why does the United States engage in imperialism? Well, one, we need more raw materials. And so, we're really looking, we're still chasing the European economies. Great Britain's economy is bigger than ours is, it's better than ours is, and it's really fueled. I mean, Great Britain, England is a little tiny island, and, they control about 25% of the planet through their colonies, and they're extracting resources from their colonies, and that's what's fueling their economy. And we look at that and we're like, if we're going to compete, we got to do something similar. We need access to those resources. And the big ones are going to be coal, oil, and sugar cane. In a world pre-refrigeration, sugar becomes vitally important. So we need raw materials. We need new markets. And remember what a market is. It's just somebody to sell, for our purposes. It's somebody to sell stuff to. There's financial markets. That's different where goods are traded, but for our purposes, it's people to sell stuff to. So we need to be able to sell all the stuff that we're making, and we're looking for new places for Americans to invest their money. So if you're making a killing in textiles, that's great, but you have all this extra money, and in a capitalist system, really what you need to do is capitalism is all about taking profits and reinvesting it in the economy to be able to secure more profits. And that's capital. Capital is cash. That's what capital means. And so if you're making a bunch of money in the textile industry and you want to be able to, build your wealth up, you can take those profits and diversify your investments by investing in a sugarcane plantation in Cuba or Hawaii or something like that, and then those profits will make you more profits. And you want to diversify and have your money in a bunch of different places, because if the textile industry crashes, you don't lose your entire fortune because you've got money in sugarcane too. I mean, that's kind of a concept that we recognize today with retirement investing in the stock market. Diversification is good. So this is all going to coincide with this kind of renewed sense of nationalism, or you got to understand this is happening at the same time as scientists are. Herbert Spencer is promoting the idea of social Darwinism or survival of the fittest, and so the countries that seem to be on top, Western European countries, scientists are saying, well, that's because you're more fit than the rest of the world. And so that's really going to create this sense of superiority that, oh, well, our societies are on top, so that must mean we're more fit. So that's justification to go into less technologically advanced societies and dominate them. And so there's this sense of nationalism and national pride that's being reinforced through social Darwinism. This is bad, right? Social Darwinism is bad because it groups ethnicities and then it ranks those ethnicities. Bad things always happen when society says it's okay to group people by race and then essentially create racial hierarchies based on that. When you say all white people are the same and all black people are the same and all Hispanic people are the same, or have this more than just a common shared experience, what inevitably happens is hierarchies start to form. And so when those hierarchies form, that then gives justification to essentially take advantage of entire ethnic groups. And so that's something that we always want to avoid. We don't ever want to be in a position where society says it's okay to say that all white people are the same. Because then we start to do what racists do, and we start to assign collective guilt to an entire ethnic group, regardless of their the individual's actual guilt. It's not okay to say all black people are the same, but social Darwinism has done that, and so societies, countries are doing that. They're saying, well, our society is more advanced, therefore it must be better. The countries that are less advanced fall lower on the hierarchy, and so they're less fit. And so because they're less fit, maybe they shouldn't have those resources. And so this renewed sense of nationalism is kind of fueling this idea that we should move overseas and kind of dominate the societies that fall lower on that kind of a hierarchy. And so we are going to be looking overseas. We feel like we're behind. Great Britain's already snatched up about 25% of the planet. The French and the Dutch, they're expanding as well. The Germans are starting to unify, and they're going to be playing the game here pretty shortly. And so this is same thing with the Italians. We're feeling like we're a little late to the game here. So, European nations have been doing this for a long time. America feels like we're late to the game, and that if we're going to compete with Europe economically, that we have to start to expand as well. Now, to be able to do this, we're going to have to build up a large modern navy. Teddy Roosevelt, as Undersecretary of the Navy, is going to really be responsible in large part for pushing this new modern Navy. Well, why do you have to have a Navy if you want to expand, internationally? Well, it makes sense, right? Well, two big reasons. One, you're going to have ships to ship the goods back and forth. If we're in it for raw materials and sell stuff, we've got to move goods back and forth between these nations. In a world without, airplanes, you're going to do that with ships, with cargo ships in the Navy. The second thing is you got to protect those ships, so you're going to have battleships to protect our trade. But also, some of the places that we're going to go get these resources don't want us to interfere with their with their country or with their society, and you're going to have a navy to kind of force them into some of these economic deals, and America will do that. Sometimes it's not. With Alaska, we're not really going to have to do that. Hawaii ends up being this really kind of unique thing. But certainly in the Philippines, we're going to have a navy to kind of force the Filipinos to enter into some of these trade deals. So, first place we're going to talk about is Alaska. Alaska is going to be purchased by this guy right here, William Seward. William Seward was Secretary of State for Abraham Lincoln, and he is going to purchase Alaska from Russia. So, it's funny, he gets totally mocked for this. I mean, William Seward is probably one of the greatest American government workers that you've never heard of. He was Lincoln's right-hand man through the Civil War. He was one of the first guys talking about like total equality for African Americans, really kind of push the moral issue, the anti-slavery issue. So he's important in that aspect. But he's also important because he buys Alaska. And at the time he gets ridiculed. They call it Seward's Folly or Seward's Icebox because he pays $7.2 million. It's just a couple cents an acre. So he gets a great deal. But he's ridiculed because people think that the only thing in Alaska is ice. Now, people are dumb. They're wrong. William Seward, this purchase is going to be one, the Louisiana purchase is the best purchase we ever make, but Alaska's up there. So he buys it. And so he doesn't buy it because he knows that it's going to have gold and oil, which it will have. He buys it because he's doing a favor for Russia. Russia needs the money. They're in some trouble. The Russian government's not very stable. There's been, all kinds of wars in Europe that have kind of wrecked their economy. And so, but the Russians supported the North during the Civil War. And so they essentially said, hey, we helped you, the North, during the Civil War and you won. We need your help now. And Seward says, look, I can't just give you money, but you own Alaska. And we would really like, because of the Monroe Doctrine, we want all European powers, and we're going to consider Russia a European power, even though most of their countries in Asia. We want these European powers out of North America, and so we'll buy to help you and to get another major European power out of North America. We'll buy Alaska from you. And they agreed to $7.2 million. And so to do this favor for Russia and to kind of control, to kick out a European power, we buy Alaska. The other thing Alaska does is it allows us to be able to put refueling stations in Alaska. So if we want to trade with Asia, we can, we're sending people, ships out of Oregon, which is, in the very northwest, and we're sending it all the way over to Asia. They can kind of hop up to Alaska and then down over to Asia. So it's important for strategic reasons as well. It's huge. It's twice the size of Texas. I mean, it's this massive area. So we're going to increase our land size. But people just think, well, yeah, you bought a lot of ice. That's all you bought. Well, after Seward dies, they're going to discover gold in 1896, which is going to more than pay for Alaska. And so good job, Seward. And then eventually the gold, it doesn't run out, but it kind of trickles down to like it's not as impactful to the economy. And so we'll just say it runs out. Eventually the gold kind of runs out. And then when the gold runs out, guess what we find? Oil. And bam, all of a sudden now Alaska is economically this super great purchase. Now, Seward doesn't get any credit for that while he's alive. As a matter of fact, when he dies, he feels like he dies a failure because of the purchase of Alaska. But history has essentially redeemed him because Alaska is that important. So it's economically important, but it is also increasing our holdings in the Pacific. We need new markets. We need people to buy our stuff. Asia is that market. Asia is across the Pacific. The more land we control around the Pacific, the more we can secure our trade with Asia. So this is a really important piece for that. So, why did Seward want the land? 3 reasons. 1, to show gratitude to Russia. 2, to get European powers out of North America. And 3, because it's like one very important piece of controlling the Pacific Ocean and then essentially trade with Asia. So this is a actual picture of Alaska superimposed over the continental United States, just to show you how much land that Seward actually purchased. I mean, it's huge. It's gigantic. It's cold. All right. So the next piece of land that we're going to acquire, we pick up Guam. Essentially buy Guam, and then move, which is an island in the Pacific, and so that's a small part that'll become important later during World War II. But the next major piece we're going to pick up is going to be Hawaii in 1898. Hawaii is really unique. And it's unique based on how we actually acquire it. We're not going to buy it. We're not going to go to war for it. It's weird. We'll get there. So, why is Hawaii important? Well, it's important for a number of reasons. One, it uses a refueling station, right? Think of it as a gas station. It's like halfway across the Pacific to Japan and to China to Asia. And so, if you're on one of these coal-fired ships, you're going to need to stop along the way to get more fuel and to get supplies. And so, Hawaii is used for that. Also, if you could put a military base on it, allows you to patrol the Pacific and kind of secure your trade, which is what we will do ultimately. Right? It attracted American missionaries. So what happened was that these missionaries were traveling to Asia to try and convert Asians to Christianity, and so along the way they would stop in Hawaii, and these islands were filled with natives. And so, some of the missionaries that were headed to Asia were like, oh my God, like there are people here that aren't Christian, and the weather is gorgeous. So, like, why would we not want to live on one of these islands? And so they're going to stop in Hawaii to try and convert the native population to Christianity. And when they do that, they're going to stay there. And when they stay there, they realize that there's all kinds of sugarcane growing on this island. Now, sugarcane is vitally important, in a world where the average person doesn't have refrigeration, right? I mean, so you got to eat, and sometimes without refrigeration, your food gets a little rotten. And one way to kind of change that, and it doesn't change the fact that it's rotten, but one of the ways to kind of make it palatable to eat the food is rub a bunch of sugar on it, right? To kind of cover up the nastiness. And so sugarcane, I mean, is very, very important to the economy. And so these missionaries like write home about like, hey, there's lots of sugarcane here, and there's probably a way to make some money off of this. And so investors hear about it and they're going to start flooding to Hawaii to start sugarcane plantations, and they will, gangbusters. And so it gets to the point that these American businessmen are buying so much Hawaiian land that the actual government in Hawaii is going to get upset. I say government, so the Hawaii's populated. It's got an indigenous population of Hawaiians that have their own government. They have a king, and the king initially is selling kind of this sugarcane fields, land to Americans and making a lot of money off of it. But then once these Americans on these sugarcane plantations realize that the Hawaiian labor is very expensive, they start bringing in immigrants from Asia that are willing to work for less, and the Hawaiians will start to get concerned. They're getting concerned that the richest, most powerful people in Hawaii and these gigantic landowners are on an island where owning land is very important. Are these American landowners are becoming more powerful than the Hawaiians themselves? So these American investors here are going to start to become very, very powerful within Hawaii. And so when the king dies, eventually his daughter is going to take over, and his daughter is going to have to deal with kind of the mess that the king made. And so she's going to really start to talk about Hawaii for Hawaiians, and she's going to restrict immigration. So she's going to start to restrict the amount of Asians coming in to work in these plantations. She's going to require that Hawaiians get hired and that they get paid a decent wage to work in these sugarcane plantations, which are very dangerous, right? Mosquitoes live in these areas like crazy. And so, particularly like in the Cuban sugarcane fields, but in Hawaii, it's dangerous too. There's poisonous snakes. And so it's a dangerous job. So means you should probably pay your workers well. And the American sugar cane plantation owners in Hawaii really aren't. She's going to restrict land sales and is going to be talking about requiring some of that land to be returned. And so these sugar cane plantation owners really don't like her, the Queen Liliuokalani. And so they're going to essentially start a revolt. And this is why Hawaii is unique. America doesn't go to war with Hawaii. And we don't just outright buy Hawaii from the Hawaiians. It's going to be American businessmen that sabotage the Queen. And essentially have the Queen overthrown. So Queen Liliuokalani is going to be overthrown by essentially American businessmen. There are American Marines on the island. They're using the island as like a way station, right? And so there are American Marines on the island, and these American businessmen are going to convince and bribe essentially these Marines to help them overthrow the Queen, and they do. And so the businessmen essentially take over, and immediately they want annexation to become legally a part of America. Not quite a state yet, right? Annexation just means America claims that territory for their own. Now, they want that because they want to make sure the Queen doesn't take back Hawaii. There's been a new tariff introduced that is going to, put taxes on sugarcane that's imported into the United States, and these businessmen don't want to have to be, they don't want to have to pay that tariff, so they want to be a part of the United States to escape that. There's multiple reasons why they want to be a part of the United States, but President Grover Cleveland is going to say no to that. He looks at this and is like, that's shady. And so, and we should not do that. And so he doesn't support it. And as a matter of fact, he even tells these businessmen that they should reestablish the Queen. The businessmen say, no, there's no way that they're going to do that. So Cleveland, the American government actually does the right thing here, and they don't support what happened to the Queen Liliuokalani. Now, ultimately, there's some people, in the 21st century that say, well, the American government should have forced the Queen to go back. Yeah, I mean, yes, with hindsight, that is probably true. But remember, you can't judge history based on 21st century morals and values. I mean, the President Cleveland, did what he thought was best, and didn't support this. The American government didn't support this system. and the overthrow of the Queen. So, did the American government handle it perfectly? No, but they certainly didn't want or encourage what happened. So Hawaii will remain independent under the control of these American businessmen until 1898. In 1898, President McKinley, who is an expansionist president, is going to say, hey, look, the Queen's never going to come back. And Hawaii is just too vitally important to American interests and American trade in the Pacific, and will actually annex Hawaii in 1898. And then eventually in 1950, we'll make it a state. So it takes a very long time. Because there's Hawaiians to this day that say, no, we should, they still think that that America, went about this the wrong way, and that, there is still a Hawaii for Hawaiians movement in Hawaii. And so, you're not going to be getting until 1950s that the majority of Hawaiians are going to actually, want to be willing to go through the statehood process. So Hawaii ends up becoming a American. It's actually 1959 that they become the 50th state. So it takes a long time for this to happen. But by 1898, Hawaii is now an integral part of our plan to secure the Pacific, which is clearly going to play a major role in World War II. Okay, that sums up the lecture for today. I appreciate your time. We will pick up the industrialization unit tomorrow with the Spanish-American War, which is kind of a continuation of the ideas of American imperialism. Thank you very much for your time, and I will see you again shortly.